Hey, what's up? Today we've got a clip that perfectly shows what can happen when someone's ideas are put under even a little bit of scrutiny. There are plenty of people who are perfectly comfortable sharing opinions as long as they're surrounded by people who already agree with them. But once they're challenged in a public discussion, things fall apart really quickly. That's why so many political conversations stay inside social media bubbles. It's much easier to repeat talking points than it is to defend them when someone starts asking follow-up questions. Once the conversation leaves that uncomfortable environment, you often see how weak some of these arguments actually are. Here we have a creature named JoJoFromJerz. You may or may not know who this is. If you don't know who this is, boy, are you lucky. Today's example is a really good illustration of everything I've said. The clip comes from an appearance on the Piers Morgan show, where a discussion eventually turned towards the Charlie Kirk subject. What follows is a back and forth that raises a larger question about how political labels are thrown around today and whether people are actually using those words accurately. So many times people say words that they just don't know the definition of. Take a look at this exchange, and when it's done, we'll talk.
Point, if at any point you're somebody who's looking at the Tates and saying, yeah, that's what it means to be a man, then you're confused to say the very least. And something else is missing in your life that you're trying to fill with this manufactured idea of what it is to be a man.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this is, if you want talking about conflation, right, conflating messaging, this is a woman who said that Charlie Kirk was the king of the incels, right?
Yeah,
so
see, this is what's so fun, right?
Talk
Dude,
about
such a
don't
good
know
point.
what words. Talk about what don't know what words mean, right? A guy married to former model, right, who has children is king of the incels. It's like, give me a break. He also said that he's the king of Hitler Youth, right? TV USA. They don't know what words mean. And so here she's going to pretend that suddenly she knows what the word masculinity means. Masculinity is set and enriched through virtue ethics and the idea of the virtues around the male and the idea of virtues around the feminine. That's how we even know what femininity is, what masculinity is. Don't try to tell us what masculinity and femininity is. You don't even know what words mean. If you're going to call a guy like Charlie Kirk the king of the incels, you don't even know what words mean.
Charlie Kirk was married to Erica Kirk, who, by the way, may or may not have been introduced to him by Donald Trump. Because she worked for Donald Trump before she met Charlie Kirk.
What?
So what?
Yes.
So what?
Well, there's lots of speculation as to how that all came to pass. But to say that Charlie Kirk was the king of the incels is not a referendum on Charlie Kirk's choices in his life. Charlie Kirk went to college campuses with Turning Point and courted young men who were incels. They were voluntarily celibate. They
What?
believe
What?
Charlie
You're
Kirk
just
went to
making
college
stuff
campuses
up?
and he found a bunch of young guys who didn't know where they belonged, right? They didn't have a group.
That doesn't make them
couldn't get
incels,
laid.
though,
So they
Joe.
see
That doesn't
Charlie
make them
Kirk comes in there
incels.
and he fills this void. And yeah, that was part of the original draw of Charlie Kirk.
How does that make
100%.
them incels, Joe? How would that make
Because-
them incels? He has a pro-marriage,
Because they wanted
pro-family
to blame
message. Get
somebody
married.
else. They wanted to blame somebody else for the fact that they didn't have enough game to get a girl.
Wow, there is a lot to unpack there. The biggest thing that stood out for me wasn't even the disagreement itself. People are allowed to disagree. What stood out was how casually certain labels were being used without any attempt to justify or define them. Andrew Wilson made the point that if someone is willing to describe Charlie Kirk as the king of incels, despite the obvious facts about his personal life, then maybe the issue isn't the disagreement. Maybe it's that words are simply being used as insults instead of descriptions. And honestly, that's something we've seen become more common and more common over the past couple years. Rather than debating someone's arguments, it's often easier to assign them a label that already carries a negative connotation. If the label sticks, you don't have to spend much time addressing what they actually said. Instead of engaging with ideas, the discussion becomes about attaching the harshest possible characterization to the other side. Whether it's racist, fascist, Nazi, or in this case, incel, The pattern is pretty familiar, isn't it? Once that label is applied, the conversation usually stops right there. The discussion also touched on young men who gravitate towards organizations like Turning Point USA. Instead of asking why some young men are looking for direction, purpose, or community, the implication was that they should simply be dismissed with another insult. That seems like a pretty simplistic way to look at something that's actually way more complicated than that. For a lot of young men, the years between the late teens and the early 20s are very difficult. They're trying to establish careers, develop confidence, figure out relationships, becoming financially independent, and discovering just exactly where and how they fit into our world. That's not a unique experience to one political ideology. It's simply part of growing up. I went through it, and you went through it, and if you haven't gone through it, you will. Most people of 19 or 20 don't have everything figured out. They don't have years of professional success behind them. They haven't built long-term relationships. They are still learning who they are. So if someone speaks to that audience and encourages personal responsibility, self-improvement, or getting involved in something bigger than themselves, it's worth asking why that message resonates instead of immediately assuming something negative about everyone listening, whether you agree with Charlie Kirk politically or not. Reducing every young man who attends one of his events to a stereotype doesn't really explain anything at all. It replaces analysis with just a broad generalization. That's why this video is so impactful. Instead of clarifying the original statement when challenged, there was an attempt to redefine it in a way that still would preserve the insult. Rather than saying, maybe I could have phrased that differently, the discussion shifted towards trying to justify the label after the fact. That, I don't know if you knew this, doesn't exactly strengthen the argument. More broadly, I think moments like this help explain why so many political discussions end up going nowhere. Once people stop using words consistently, meaningful conversations becomes just harder to have. If every disagreement immediately turns into assigning the harshest possible labels, then nobody is really ever debating ideas anymore. They're just insulting each other and debating caricatures rather than actual facts and details. And that is very unfortunate because there are real conversations worth having about masculinity, young men, politics, and culture. Those discussions become much less productive when they begin with assumptions instead of facts. At the end of the day, viewers can watch the clips and decide for themselves, but I think it speaks for itself. People use words, and they either don't want to know the meaning or don't care to find out what it is. Let me know what you think in the comments about this video. If you like the format I used, if you'd like to see more like this, make sure you're subscribed to my channel. And thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Peace.